Well, let me start by saying, in general, and I've talked a little bit about this, I think one of the problems with economics is it hasn't been prepared to take on the big questions. And as I said, part of the big questions, tilting necessarily over into kind of questions about values that need to be addressed. So I think, does economics explain capitalism? I don't think so. I think people have tended to shy away from kind of the grand treatise in the last 30 years, and that was what was so amazing about Thomas Piketty's book, is he came up with a very big question about income inequality, empirically done over decades, and kind of the world said, "Wow, we need to really reflect on that." So all credit to him for putting up the big picture on there. So I don't think the economics profession has gone in the direction of trying to explain capitalism. But if I step back for a minute I would say, I'm always a little bit reluctant on the labels. We have human systems, and the way they're organized varies greatly, but sometimes there's common characteristics. So if you think of the health system in most of the OECD countries, right? So you have publicly funded health system, so the state's involved. In some cases, it's delivered by a private actor. Of course, the equipment and the pharmaceuticals that are part of the system are delivered by other private actors who are profit-driven. So let's call them capitalist entities. And that system more or less works. Some countries it works better. I think France, for example, delivers very good health outcomes. We're Canadians. I think most Canadians are relatively satisfied with our socialized healthcare. But the system itself is a mixture of different kind of approaches. And I think it also shows, one thing that's critical for economics is economics, or the economy, is a human construct, and the subsystems within it are a human construct. The way we can make those constructs is up to us at the end of the day, within limits, because if you try to do something that people are going to bend the rules or can't follow or impossible, they aren't going to do. So, but we can have quite different ways of organizing, and the capitalist principles in most systems will play a role. So again, if we take education, if you think of OECD countries in primary and secondary education, most education is delivered in a state-delivered system. So actually the teacher, unlike the doctors in many cases, the teachers are employees of the state. But the textbooks are supplied by private capitalist enterprises. They're out to make a profit. They're trying to get you to use the new textbook. So again, it's kind of a mixed system. Or you take an example like Hong Kong. So I think many people would, if they thought of Hong Kong, would think perhaps it's the most capitalist system in the world. But again, Hong Kong has socialized medicine, where the government owns all the tertiary hospitals and pays for primary health care. It also, in fact, 50% of people in Hong Kong live in government-owned housing. So again, you have this mixed system. So I think the term capitalism is critical, but you again, like we talked about the NFL and the English Premier League example, you need to get into the system details and which parts of it work well with a market mechanism, private capital, which ones work better with a more socially directed sort of system, either for reasons of efficiency in some cases and reasons of fairness. I mean, one of the other critical aspects to this is there was an incredible book written by Fred Hirsch, who sadly died when he was young, book written in the 1970s called The Social Limits to Growth. And he had two incredible insights, one of which is the social limits to growth and what happens as we become wealthier and we all pursue more positional goods and don't get better off. But the other great insight he had is that if something is privatized, you'll get too much of it. And something is publicly funded, you get too little of it. So in a sense, it's not as though the market system necessarily delivers a better outcome. It delivers more of something. The public sector, usually you have scarcity to some extent. Either system can work depending on what you're actually trying to accomplish. To give an example, in the United States, you have private sector prisons. Well, in a system with private sector prisons and high amount of political contributions to campaigns, you get a result, which is there are more people in prison in the United States than anywhere else. So the term capitalism, I would say we're always going to have. I mean, I think for a long time, certainly, the next few generations, we're always going to have systems that are mixed with different elements. And what we term as capitalism, which is, private capital, market determined, decisions by actors intersecting, prices set by the market, that element is going to remain a strong part of many, many systems. Now, of course, in some systems, the private sector is 95% of it. So if you take, for example, restaurants, I mean, I mentioned I went to China the first time in 1983, communist China, it barely opened up. And we were in Beijing, there were very few restaurants, and the restaurants that were there were owned by the state, and they weren't very good. Of course, now you go many places in the world, but certainly Beijing or China, I mean, you have a private sector restaurants. They're absolutely fantastic. The role of the state in that capitalist system is largely just to health and hygiene regulations on that. But 95% of what happens is capitalism. It works perfectly fine. So there are many systems where the capitalist systems should dominate, but there are other systems like health, education, issues around the environment, where there's always going to be a mixed model. But I suspect the pricing mechanism used in the right way is going to be something of almost everything that humans do, because it's used properly. The pricing system is so powerful.